Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the phonograph record, or simply put, vinyl. And what is vinyl, you ask? Well, I'm glad you did ask. A vinyl is a flat disc, which typically comes in a 12 or 10 or even 7-inch varieties. It has modulated grooves, and when you place a beat on it, it produces sound. I don't know all the technical aspects, that's what I do know though, and I love them. And I've loved them for many years. I have very fond memories of being a child and literally going to what was once record stores, and this was like before like tapes and CDs were even a thing. I mean, this is going back to the real early 80s when I was just a very small child, but I have that special memory. So records have always been there for me, and I've always loved them, but somehow I've always kind of preferred CDs in the greater scope of things, but recent years, and especially in the past year, I've really become fond of vinyl, really rediscovered my love for it, and I've just been binging a lot. But I will admit that buying dark ambient vinyls is something new for me. I really only started to get into it when Cyclic Law started to re-release the raison and Desiderii Marginis discography, and since then I've only collected maybe a handful or so of dark ambient related vinyls, but nevertheless, it is, I've found that I absolutely love hearing dark ambient on vinyl, and just those same special feelings that I get when I buy, like, say, a black metal record on vinyl. It exists within the dark ambient realm too. And the funny thing about it was, and I think the reason why I never really bought dark ambient on vinyl in the past was simply because I've always associated dark ambient as being one, long journey and experience. And as you know, I've often mentioned that I like to listen to dark ambient music while relaxing, reading, or even sleeping. So the idea of having to get up around like that 27, 28 minute mark when the record would end just didn't seem appealing to me. But I found that I actually don't mind at all, and really most of the records I've bought I don't listen to during periods of relaxation anyway, so it's all kind of working out. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you 4 or 5 dark ambient related vinyls that I own. Don't think of this as a typical Inner Sanctum review, but more of a show and tell kind of thing. A lot of these projects that I'm going to show are very well known, and I think you'll know the names instantly, but if you don't, I implore you to check these out, and this is before I'm even getting into this, so let's get into this and let's check out these vinyls, shall we? Up first is a dark ambient classic by almost all accounts, and an album that was way overdue for a reissue. It is Desiderii Marginis' Deadbeat. Originally released in 2001 on CD by Coldmate Industry, it was re-released on vinyl and also on CD in 2018 by Cyclic Law in a limited edition of 3,000 copies. Deadbeat is, by a lot of it also accounts and fans of Desiderii Marginis, as being kind of the first album where he really kind of came to form. His previous album, Songs Over Ruins, which came out in 1997, although quite good and really kind of special and unique for its time, it wasn't really pure dark ambient. It didn't necessarily define what would become known as a Desiderii Marginis sound. And it's very important to mention that this project, which is created by Johan Levin from Mjölby, Sweden, is a very, very unique project. And so far I've never heard any other band that sounds exactly like this, which is what really just makes this project all the more special, and why I would always just have to implore you guys to check out this project. I know I've referenced it many times before, but if you've not heard this album or never heard Desiderii Marginis in general, you really need to get up to date with things and check out this project. And while I will be the first one to admit this is not pure dark ambient like that Lust Mord or Khmer Heights sound, there's much more character and even something of a more song structure and melody and character here, but it's still those dark ambient vibes and rich, unbelievably dark atmosphere is there, and it is a beautiful record. And as I said earlier, it was well needed for a re-release, and I'm very happy I got this record. And originally, like I said, it was released by Cyclic Law, but I managed to get this copy from Malignant Records about a year ago, and it was just awesome to get this in my collection because, I had never had the original CD. I only had downloaded MP3s several years ago, and, I could never get my hands on the CD, so it's great to finally have this, and just, since I've had this has become a real regular staple in my listening rotation. It's a one, I'm impressed every time I put it on, and it's just a record that inspires me as a dark ambient artist too. The front cover is not exactly the same as the original CD press, and I'm not sure if maybe the original photo was lost or something or what, but the color scheme and the layout is actually very comparable, which is cool. And the back cover here you can see is has all the track titles and everything. And at first glance, I thought like the titles were in Cyrillic or something like that. But then upon closer observation, it's just a really peculiar font. But it really threw me a curveball for a minute there, and it may do the same for you if you should happen to pick up this record. And on the inside here, we have sleeve, which has another, kind of, I guess it was taken from a cathedral or graveyard or something like that, and that's kind of the theme on a lot of the early Desiderii Marginis records. And on the other side, we have the track listing and recording information with the same photograph once again. And then the vinyl itself. So we have side A, or side 1, and side B, side 2. I believe there is also a limited, even more limited edition version of this where it is a red vinyl or has a mixed black and red swirl to it or something like that. I probably should have researched that better, but in any case, I don't have that version. I wish I did, but regardless, it'll sound the same. So this is Desiderii Marginis, and as I said before, this is top-notch dark ambient, and you can't go wrong with this record or any record in the Desiderii Marginis discography. And I'm truly hoping the Cyclic Law re-releases everything Desiderii Marginis has done, because when it comes to Johann Lieben's creations, you simply can't go wrong. So definitely check it out. That's Dead Beats. Originally released in 1993 on Cold Made Industry, this is another classic that was well overdue for a re-release on vinyl. The item in question is Raison d'Etres Prospectus 1. Although Raison d'Etres had a couple cassette tapes before this album, this is generally regarded as his first album, and rightly so, because it was on the masterful Cold Made Industry and it had got a great amount of attention. And it's been commonly said that when this album was released, Roger Carmanek from Cold Made Industry, he didn't know exactly how to market it, and he came up with the term dark ambient. And the term dark ambient definitely typically stems from this record and upon its release. So in a lot of ways, a lot of people regard this record as like the birthplace of modern dark ambient, even though obviously, you can trace the roots further back in the 80s, even the 70s. But for a lot of intents and purposes, a lot of people will consider this to be the first true dark ambient music release. Regardless of all that, though, this is a masterful release from Raison d'Etres, and it is, again, not really, traditional dark ambient in the overly gloomy, droney, cavernous feel. It is much more melodic. There's a lot of choral elements. There's lots of like chanting and prayers going on, and it has a very, sacral and cathedral, just this massive sound, but still dark and foreboding and melancholy, just beautiful. And, for something released in 1993, I feel like the keyboards really sound like, really developed and well thought out, and just, I guess, sometimes when I think about keyboards, I always just, think that, they weren't as advanced back in the early 90s or the 80s, but then when I kind of go back and dig into some of these old records, I find out that they are, in fact, they're just a beautiful instrument. It's always been capable of creating just really wonderful music, and, that's definitely the case with Prospectus 1, and I guess anyone who's followed Peter Anderson's project over the years knows that he's changed a lot. He has done more droney, long-form stuff, and he's got a slew of other projects too, where he's just pretty much, gone down a path of just, trying out every type of, electronic music imaginable, and he is undoubtedly, one of the most prolific composers to come along in the past 3 decades. And this is a record, and this is the artist just defines quality again. This is an album that I wouldn't necessarily say is mandatory, because I kind of feel like this is where Raison d'Etres kind of started, and he got better from here. But for all intents and purposes, often, as I said, seen as the first dark ambient record. And if you just are curious about the roots of this genre, well, this is a great place to start. On the front cover of Prospectus 1, we have a classic painting from the 1800s called The Abbey and the Oakwood, and you may have seen this in other releases in the dark music genre. I know there's at least a dark wave band. I can remember, I think the old death metal band Mythic used this on their album back in the early 90s, so it was a very common painting, and why not? It just has such a gloomy and dark atmosphere, and like it's when you stare at this painting, these compositions really come to life, and it's it's like that thing I've always said where like you can just kind of place yourself in this gloomy world that this artist created, and it's just unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, it's just look at that. And, wow, it's just such a gloomy painting. And you always think like all the gloom and doom kind of stuff, like that was like a newer thing, and it kind of came with like gloomy music and gloomy cinema. But it was always kind of part of us as humans, and it's always been there. And a beautiful painting, and it looks so good on this vinyl too. And on the back side, we have a continuation of that painting. And it's important to note that the tracks on side D are actually bonus tracks. And I guess in 2013, this album was actually re-released by Old Europa Cafe on CD, and it was remastered and featured and does, I think, like a half a dozen bonus tracks. I'm not really sure from what release they stem from, but I'm gonna guess it's probably from those cassettes that came before this album. But this release, unfortunately, only has 4 of those tracks, but nevertheless, more bang for your buck is awesome, and you get 4 bonus tracks of this one. And on the inside, we have a very cool, I think it's, I don't know if it's part of that painting, but it has a very thematic thing, and there we have the track listing information, a little bit about the old pressing and the one from 2013, and of course this new pressing. And then each vinyl here, it's awesome because it comes in a gatefold. Again, here's side A. Alright, here's side A. There's side A, and the other one is side B. One out. And side C and D. So again, a wonderful record from Raison the birthplace of dark ambient to some starts right here, and this is for those that wants to know the roots of the genre, this is mandatory listening right here, but not necessarily Raison finest hour per se, but still a great record and well worth checking out. So that's Prospectus 1 by Raison. Alright, I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball with this next one. I'm going to call this one dark ambient music, even though it's a good mix of things and it's not dark ambient in any traditional sense. I figure that if those earlier Raison and Desiderii Marginis records could be dark ambient, why can't this? So the album in question is Burzum's The Ways of Yore, released back in 2014. Burzum is a sole creation of Vargi Vikernes, and in case you don't know Burzum or Vargi Vikernes and his history and his infamy in the black metal scene and really just metal scene in general, then I would highly advise you to hop over to Wikipedia and Google and search his name or search Burzum and kind of get his story. But long story short, back in the early 90s, he murdered someone, he burned down several churches, and had plans to blow up churches too with dynamite. And although he served 16 years in jail, he was released back in 2009, recorded several more albums, got in trouble again, and had an infamous YouTube channel, which eventually got pulled for racial views and political things. And although it was quite an interesting and diverse channel, it touched into some very sensitive area, and it was just a matter of time really, and it got pulled down, which was unfortunate because he covered a lot of other interesting stuff, a lot of history on his music and the black metal scene in general, and paganism, and just even gardening. It was very diverse and very interesting. I really enjoyed watching it, so it's kind of sad that it's gone now, but that's a entirely different story. So let's talk about The Ways of Yore, his last proper album. It was released back in 2014, and it's a mixture of basically simple folk tunes and dungeon synth and dark ambient-like characteristics. It's not by any means overly advanced or technical stuff. In fact, Burzum's music has always been very simple but highly atmospheric, and that's what I've always loved about Burzum, be it his black metal compositions or these folky dungeon synth and ambient tunes. It's simple, and you can just kind of tell the simplicity. It sounds like he's always used really cheap instruments and cheap recording qualities, but he somehow just has this really special atmosphere that's just unlike anyone else out there. Here's the front cover. And it's got a picture of Merlin, and I'll actually tell you right here. Front cover painting is Vivian and Merlin by Gustave Doré. And as you probably know, if you're a black metal fan, Gustave Doré's paintings are very common in the black metal scene, and no surprise to see it used here again. As you can see here too, several songs in here. Some are very short, some are longer. For example, like there's a re-recording of the song Emptiness. It originally appears on one of Burzum's old black metal albums under the title Tomhets, which I guess means emptiness, or I probably mispronounced it, but whatever. You Norwegian people can laugh and correct me later, I don't really care. But probably the best song on this album is The Reckoning of Man. It's got a really beautiful and simple piano melody, just amazing atmosphere, while Varg sort of speaks his tale of like times of yore, and it's a really cool song, really beautiful, I really love it. It's actually the reason why I bought this vinyl. Some of the more simple folk tunes are interesting, but not necessarily enough to really, demand a great deal of replay. But I bought this record for like $15, so I'm not disappointed. For The Reckoning of Man, it was totally worth it. So anyway, here's the inside. It's a pretty simple affair. Kind of, it would have been cool if there was more pictures in here and everything, but there's not. So that's what we get. Basic recording information there as well. And the vinyls themselves are remarkably similar between the two, so I'm just going to show you, there's that, and then on the other side, we have that. So, pretty cool stuff. Like I said, this was not necessarily the most well-received Burzum album. Most people do prefer his black metal recordings, but, to each their own. I like this album. It's not great. It's not something I'm going to throw on a lot, but like I said, for The Reckoning of a Man, it was worth buying. It's a cool little tune, and it makes it for an interesting experience. So if you like black metal, if you like dungeon synth or ambient, Burzum is a project well worth checking out. This album is obviously different from the earlier stuff, but it's worth checking out. So check it out. All right, guys, one more, and we're going way back in the time for this one. This is, when you talk about this stuff, this is really the roots of dark ambient music. And again, some people may argue this, and some people may totally agree with me, but if you really follow the roots and the progression of dark ambient music, you can trace it all the way back to the 60s, possibly even before that. There was a lot of experimental music leading up to, the more common experimental and noise and industrial and dark ambient music we all kind of became familiar with in the 80s and the 90s. But this is a true classic, and one I would have to highly recommend. So the album in question is Klaus Schulze's Time Wind, released in 1975 on Virgin Records. Klaus Schulze, in case you don't know, was an original member of Tangerine Dream, who they themselves were a massively important band in the what became known as the Krautrock scene in Germany in the early 70s. And Krautrock was basically Germany's answer to England's progressive rock movement. And as I recall, I think the term krautrock was coined by a journalist from England who wrote for Melody Maker, and I think it was more of a mockery than anything, but the term just kind of stuck. And Klaus Schulze stuck around for only a couple Tangerine Dreams before going solo and having a massive discography, which still continues to this very day. And in the early days of Klaus Schulze's career, he would basically write two long songs that would one on the A side and one on the B side each of the vinyl, typically in the 28 to 30 minute range. And this would be, something that someone like Mortis would take as an influence when he started his career in the early 90s. He wanted to do something very comparable, and that's why all those old Mortis songs are in that 25 to 30 minute range too. He was directly influenced by Klaus Schulze. But the music of Klaus Schulze is quite different from Mortis. It is very drony and spacey and ethereal and beautiful music, which was created on a modular synthesizer back in the 1970s. And it's important to mention that the modular synthesizer and analog synthesizer are quite different. An analog synthesizer is very compact and small, whereas back in the 70s, a modular synthesizer was a huge computer of sorts, where you had to basically turn knobs and plug in plugs to create the sound of the oscillator. And it was very interesting. I was actually just watching a video on YouTube of someone playing it. It's just massive, and it's just like these things are like as wide as this CD tower for something, and it's just like crazy that people still to this day collect these things and try to do music on them. But that's a whole other story. Maybe we'll talk about it some other time, or if I ever get a modular synthesizer. I don't know where I'd put it, but man, I'd love to play with one. But yeah, Klaus Schulze's music is just ethereal and spacey music. This is stuff that where you can really zone out and drift away. I mean, kind of think about the elements of early progressive rock. Think about the atmospheres you found in records like from like Genesis and Pink Floyd and Yes, but kind of take that same atmosphere and remove the guitars and almost all the vocals, and then you will have Klaus Schulze's music. And it's also interesting to note that I think a large portion of Klaus Schulze's records were very improvised, because I think back in those days you really couldn't, you really couldn't rehearse with a modular synthesizer. It was very, just improvised and created in the studio. So that's what makes this record really special too. But an amazing and memorable experience, Timeline. This is arguably his best record, and I recently only found this back in the summertime. It was in a second-hand shop somewhere in Wisconsin where me and my fiance are on vacation. I can't remember the shop or where it was right now, but it was marked at $20, and I managed to talk the guy down to 10 and explain the whole, pretty much what I just said to you, this guy, and then he just kind of looked at me and said, "Krautrock? Never heard of it." And then he said, "Fine, $10. And that was it. I got this awesome, beautiful, wonderful record for $10. Klaus Schulze, Timeline. Front, we have these, I don't know what they are, angels, demons, devils, call them what you will, but there they are, and they're dancing, and they're just, I don't know, they're all tripped out and doing psychedelic stuff or something. And then in the back cover we have, well, I don't know. A bunch of notes, and it says this LP is dedicated to Richard Wagner. LP Timeline, and it's as I said, there's 2 songs in here. One's 28, one's 30 minutes. It's just really incredible stuff. And then the vinyl itself, it comes in a normal paper sleeve, which was typical for records from the 70s. And on the record we have these conjoined twins, and just I don't know, man, it's really trippy and just crazy kind of stuff. And also take note that this vinyl is pretty much in mint condition. This is original press, so this was a hell of a find, especially finding it for $10. And again, if any of the crazy shit I just said to you sounds appealing to you, then I would highly recommend this one. This is just a masterpiece and one of Klaus Schulze's finest moments. And so again, that's Klaus Schulze, Timeline. Alright guys, that'll conclude this episode of the Inner Sanctum. Thank you as always for joining me. That'll conclude this little show and tell of a few dark ambient related vinyls in my collection. Some people have asked me about, supporting me and all this stuff, and so I've thought about setting up Patreon, but I don't want to do it just yet because I don't know if I can commit to episodes, and if I'm going to set up Patreon, I want to make sure I commit to stuff first. So hit that subscribe button. There's going to be more full-length albums. There's going to be more Inner Sanctum episodes, more just, related content to dark ambient music and related dark ambient music coming in the near future. I'm still working on the documentary I mentioned a while ago. It's taking a while, but it's going to be worth it, I think, to kind of, get an inside look at, me, not to look at how I create music. I think it'll be worth the wait. So that's coming soon. And other than that, if you want to support me, the best I can say now is just to join my Bandcamp subscription service, where if you do join, you get all of my music, plus you get a discount on my merchandise. So it's a big reward to do it, especially if you like my music. If you think my music sucks, well, don't do it, obviously. But if you like my music, it's a very good option because you get all of my albums, even some private releases that only subscribers get. So it's definitely worth checking out, and you will be directly supporting me, and hopefully, as a effect, will motivate me to make more Inner Sanctum episodes. No, I definitely do want to. I'm feeling very motivated about this stuff, and I'm having fun. I'm hoping you guys are having fun and enjoying these, and other than that, that's what I can say for now. So if Patreon comes along in the future, so be it. But until then, this is what I say. Hit that like button or check out the subscription service on the Noctilucin page. And until next time, this is your host. My name is Joe. See you next time. All right, bye.